So I may have to just because I kind of want to hear what they have to say. Hold on a second.
Hey there, is anybody talking? I can't hear anybody. I can't hear anything.
Can you hear my voice?
I don't think.
Now I
Hear you, we
can,
just
yes,
muted
thank you.
ourselves. I can hear.
Well, I was gonna
Can hear
mute
everybody.
myself, but I couldn't hear anything, so.
All right. Hello, everybody. Okay. Welcome. I'm going to turn this over to Charlotte. I'm going to be going back and forth admitting people in for the next little bit, I believe. So if you are not speaking, if you could put your microphone on mute so we don't get the feedback. I believe I am recording this, so it will be available later. We'll see how that goes. Where'd my waiting room go? There we go.
Susan, if you put me as co-host, then I can do the waiting room and you and Brittany can go ahead and get started.
Okay, now I got to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, hang on, Charlotte. Let's see. I'm not going to mute you. Let me go to more. Make host. Yes. Okay, did that do it?
Yeah. Well, and thank y'all, everybody. I think so. Let me see. Yeah, security. And now I can go enable waiting room. Yeah, so I'll be checking that. Welcome, everybody. Thank y'all for participating. If you want to get points for Be Well, and thank you, Mariah, for making that happen, just take a shot of your computer screen and then send that in an email and download it, and then you can send that to Be Well and get credit for this. And I want to thank Susan and Brittany for facilitating today and creating the information and just sharing this invaluable content. I know we all need it. So I'm going to turn it over to Susan and Brittany. And once again, I'll work on the waiting room and we'll let y'all go ahead and get started. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you. All right, yes, and if I have successfully recorded this, what will happen is I will then get it loaded onto YouTube and send that to Charlotte, and then this, we should be able to include this with the other Zoom presentations that are going up on the HR website. So, and I know we've had a couple of people ask about being able to see it because they had conflicts. So, all right, this presentation is following on the last one we did, which was approaching and dealing with change, where we talked about change styles and how that influences and interacts with anxiety. So there will be a bit of a review if you participated in that particular presentation. And the idea is to provide a little bit of information and some tools, and then give everybody a chance to ask questions and just discuss with each other your concerns and how you may be managing things. I will put in a disclaimer now. It is above my pay grade to change any policies going forward. You would have to check with somebody else for that, but I will be happy to address concerns around them. So, okay, Brittany, anything you want to add before I move to the next slide?
No, we're good
Okay.
to go.
All right, here we go. Okay, so review for those of you who were here last time and new for those of you who were not. Anxiety is a sensation we have, like many others, that is both physical and mental. It is part of our brain's system that is necessary for our survival. So it is adaptive to a point. And if you look at that little graphic there, it basically consists of these three things. We have physical symptoms of autonomic arousal, meaning our brains are designed whenever we see something that might be a threat, and that can be anything that's new, whether it is a positive or a negative. That's just what our old brain is designed to do. So then it basically, your heart rate may go up, you start breathing faster, blood is starting to go to your extremities, you may feel hot, you may feel clammy, you may break out in a sweat. All of those are things that get your brain and body designed to react in survival mode. We don't need to react that strongly to everything that makes us anxious, but that's kind of the physical part. Then what we have is we think sometimes very quickly about the nature of what we're seeing, and we decide how much of a threat is that. Now, one of the good and bad things about being human is that was I muted? Good grief.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so physical symptoms, heart rate, breathing, that kind of thing, then leads to, we think about the nature of the threat we're seeing, and human brain will let us think abstractly about it. That'll come into play in a little bit, which can be both a good and a bad thing, because it can help us or it can make the anxiety worse. And then we tend to have reactions. And if our anxiety is really high, a common reaction is avoidance. That is the flight or freeze part of fight, flight, and freeze. Again, survival. So again, adaptive to a point, but there's a lot of situations where we don't need to get as anxious maybe as we do. And that's some of what we're also going to be talking about today. So any questions on that, since apparently I was muted through part of that? Thank you for whoever caught that. Okay, come here. All right, so I like quotes. I read a lot. I watch a lot of movies. And of course, you can probably tell from a couple of the slides in here, one of the genres I like is science fiction. So this is something I want you to keep in mind when we're talking about anxiety and what you can do with it. And this is from The Wise Therapist. Was not Yoda, by the way. I was reading an article or a blog somebody wrote where they were comparing the book therapist to real therapists, and this person's real therapist compared anxiety to the Force. And I think nailed it when he said, you can let it consume you, or you can learn to keep it in balance. So keep that in mind. You will experience anxiety. How you experience it is something that you can learn to keep in balance. Okay.
All right. So when we're talking about anxiety, the first thing to keep in mind is awareness. Everything starts with awareness. For example, have you ever been working on something for so long and you just get into the zone? Before you know it, hours have passed, you've missed your lunch, and then you realize, oh, I'm starving. Well, the reality is more than likely you were probably hungry the whole time. You just weren't aware of it in that moment because you were so wrapped up in whatever it is you were doing. So that's kind of what we're thinking about is when we talk about awareness, is that it's only when you become aware of that hunger do you realize, okay, I need to feed myself. So we are all trying to learn kind of ways to cope with kind of what COVID's brought us. Our normal isn't normal anymore, whatever that may have been for you at some point. And so we're all trying to learn to adapt and cope with the new life stressors that we're all dealing with. And so now that, maybe you kind of have realized, maybe noticed, you've kind of sensed a loss of routine. Maybe you've noticed, well, I'm feeling more irritable than usual. Or maybe you've even realized that you're feeling unmotivated. Those are a lot of the similar feelings that I'm sure a lot of people are kind of going through right now. And so it's kind of important to be aware that you're not alone in the way that you feel, and that a lot of people out there probably have the same feelings. So now that we've talked about awareness, and that awareness is raised, what now? The answer is acceptance. Acceptance, so that's basically, or in other words, accept that it's okay to not be okay. Life throws whatever it will at you. It can be worse or better at times. You just kind of learn to adapt and roll with the punches, so to speak. So basically accepting the way things are. You cannot change or fix something when you're lying to yourself. So we kind of talk about being authentic with yourself and saying, you know what, maybe I'm not okay. So when you're constantly going through your daily routine and you're telling yourself, oh, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. Well, that's kind of you lying to yourself. And how can you plan or fix something when you're kind of denying or avoiding the fact that you might be feeling frustrated or feeling overwhelmed? And so by kind of telling yourself, I'm not okay, you can be kind of opening that door to possible change. So kind of going back, first step, become aware of the issue, whatever that may be. Become aware of your feelings, your emotions, kind of weed through those, and then accept and say, I'm not okay. Maybe I need to talk to somebody about this, and kind of being vulnerable with yourself and other people. And that way, when you're vulnerable, you can be validating at the same time. Go and talk to someone, and then they can say, well, you know what? I'm not feeling okay, and I kind of have been feeling some of these same emotions. And then you can talk about those, and then you can be opening that door to that change. And so the next step is basically determining kind of what you can versus what you can't change or control in any given moment. And that's kind of what Dr. Sobel's about to talk to us about.
Okay. Yes. And I also put, goodness, I have feedback. I'm hearing myself talk. That's weird. Okay, that kind of the pyramid, which we've seen from food pyramids, Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid, but I found that graphic and liked it. My prioritization for living with, not beating anxiety. Some of what Brittany just talked about, just being aware and mindful, and the acceptance, and then more working up through preventative, take action, face your fears. And then we'll talk at the end about the last two in the pyramid when we get to things to do. So, okay, move, hang on, I gotta move, oops. Close the chat there. Okay, next slide. So again, one of my favorite science fiction characters, Worf. If you don't know anything about Star Trek, he is a Klingon. They are generally not very chatty or big thinkers. They're more action people. But this was a gem when he said this to somebody. Thinking about what you cannot control only wastes energy and creates its own enemy. And I think that speaks to a lot of what's going on now. I think probably one of the scariest things about COVID-19, there is so much we don't know, and there is so much that we don't have control over. And that's very hard for most people, some more than others. If you remember back to the change styles, and you know, some people prefer to have more control and predictability. Others are a little easier going about it, but all of us struggle more when things are ambiguous or get more uncertain. So, okay, sorry, I'm getting a text, something about my feed. Okay, and what if in general, the what if this happens or that happens or this could go wrong and this might go wrong, what if is probably the most common thing that people worry about in the world. Determining whether the what if is something you can do anything about, there we go, is really important. Because it really doesn't help to spend time worrying about things that you can't do anything about. As Worf said, it wastes energy that you could put towards other things, and it really does create its own enemy because it just starts you on a spiral that makes you feel more and more anxious, to the point where you either come out fighting, you run away, or you just freeze. So, and I'm sure we've all felt like that at some point during this because there's a lot that is overwhelming. So it helps if you know what you can control. All right. How do you know that? Some of it you can find out by gathering information. And that will help you figure out, is this something I can control? Is this something I can work through? Or is this something I just need to accept? And hope for the best and move on. Now, keep in mind, know yourself. One of the things they've been saying as far as anxiety and what's going on is monitor your consumption of media and trying to get information. Too much is not good. And also keep in mind, I learned this in another presentation I watched a few weeks ago. Our brains thrive on extremes, whether they're good or bad. If you think about, you know, why we enjoy really exciting things so much, or why we're on alert when we're really anxious or really angry, our brains get going when something is extreme. And media, both marketing and news, feeds on that. The headlines try and pull you in, and they're pulling for emotions to get you to keep reading, either your anxiety or they'll try and plug in a positive feel-good piece. So know how much information is good for you to consume and what isn't. What's your limit to make a decision about how much control you have, and then how much you may not. And I'm going to turn it back over to Brent for the plan bit.
All right. So once you've gathered that information and you have a better understanding of kind of what's in your control versus what's out of your control, then we can make a plan. So that plan can be anything you want it to be. Even if you're not a planner, your plan can then be, well, I'm going to wing it. And if that's you, then that's fine. If you are a planner, a plan can be something that can help bring back that sense of structure into your life or reestablish a sense of routine. So I was talking to a friend the other day, and I kind of thought about this example. You know, you start making meatballs, you've got your ground beef and a bunch of spices, and you planned to start making meatballs. Well, something then comes up, and you no longer have that 20, 30 minutes to stand there and roll out all these meatballs and cook them. So quickly you rethink that plan. The plan was to make dinner. Well, then those meatballs become meatloaf, and you pop it in the oven 20 minutes later. The end result may have been a little bit different. You went from meatballs to meatloaf, but the end goal was met, which is dinner, feeding yourself. So that's kind of like a way to think of that a loose plan. You can plan something, but then things can change and you adapt based on what you're given in your environment. And so it just kind of goes back to knowing yourself well enough to kind of understand what you need and kind of how you want to go about making your plans, whether that be a plan for safety, plan your routine through the day, a plan for how you're going to start back in school, how you're going to go about having those classes online, help a student that comes to you with maybe a technological error or something going on. You can have those plans in place for how you're going to address certain concerns. And of course, like I said, that plan can be as loose or as structured as you want it to be. It doesn't really matter how you do it. It's knowing yourself and knowing how to address or meet your needs and concerns. Like you can write it down, post on your fridge, you can have it in your phone, or even carry around a planner. It doesn't really matter. It's whatever's going to work best for you. And so what happens when maybe something comes up that isn't in your wheelhouse? Say that you have a student that might approach you with a life-related issue or some concerns with mental health. What then? You can have a plan in place for how you're going to address that. You say, well, I'm not a mental health counselor, but I have a plan and I know what this looks like given kind of what Dr. Sobel's about to go over, and you can plan for how you're going to go about helping your students the best way you can.
Okay, thank you. All right, the last bit before we go into the discussion about our concerns, specifically around COVID or maybe more generally, is how do you know when the anxiety has reached a point that maybe you need more help than you or your current lay people support system can provide? So I found this nice little graphic. And keep in mind, with all of this that's been happening, and it's weird, I just thought about this morning. We started this semester, sadly, with the death of the young lady in the Honors College, which seems very far away now. And just about the time I think we started to work our way past that and get going, then all of this happened. So we've had several months where the environment is basically ripe for us to be anxious. So keep in mind when you're trying to decide, is my anxiety to the point where I need maybe professional help? Has it tipped over into an anxiety disorder? Am I having a normal reaction to a very stressful time? And we have a very stressful time right now. And a lot of us, it probably is a normal reaction. Although it's also a very tiring reaction. Being anxious for a long time is exhausting. Okay, but if you find that it's coming out of nowhere when things calm down, and or it is out of proportion to what's going on, and here I think is one of the main things, and lasts a long time, a lot of times after the stressor is over with, which we're not going to know for a while. But one of the main things to keep in mind here, is it interfering with your day-to-day life? That's a really good sign that maybe you need a little more support or in addition to what coping mechanisms you're currently using right now, is if you're not able to do what you need to get done. And you can see there that you're getting the physical symptoms a lot and you just feel overwhelmed all the time. That's a good time to check out some professional resources, which those are also going to be listed as links at the end of the presentation, which will be available later. But, you know, we have, we have the employee assistance program, and then whatever mental health support your insurance benefits allow. And you also do still have the information and the outreach services and consultation and even crisis intervention that the counseling center provides, even though faculty and staff no longer typically see us for individual counseling. So there are those things. I also tried to list a guide from the National Alliance on Mental Illness that I read. That it's pretty good. It's comprehensive. It has a lot of good information in a readable fashion. And I also had the coronavirus anxiety workbook from the last presentation, which is or will be available on the HR website. So if you're experiencing those things that fit the anxiety disorder, that may be time to get help. That may be talking to somebody. And then if you remember those two triangles, the last two up there, extra supports and then supplements. Sometimes people need medication to help with anxiety, again, particularly when it's interfering with day-to-day functioning and you need it, you don't really have the time or the space to allow a slower recovery from that. So those are some options. All right, here we go. Okay, now, anxiety around reopening. And this is something to keep in mind as you go forward. This is one of the things that I talk to clients a lot about. Other people I'm talking to that are really struggling with that cannot control issue, because it's Reinhold Niebuhr is or was a theologian, and this is where AA got that prayer, and it's very, very much used in the AA and branches circles. But this one helps me a lot to remember. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So, all right, about the halfway mark, what we wanted to do was leave the latter half for people's questions and discussion and sharing of how they're doing, what they're doing, that sort of thing. So at this point, I am going to open it up and we will answer what we can and refer you if we can't.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Risa.
Hi. I just wanted to add a little bit about the meds. So everybody, most everybody ought to know that I'm a counselor. One of the things with me is I know to do all that stuff. I breathe, I take one day at a time, but anxiety runs in my family. And although I did all that stuff, I still had trouble going to sleep. I still ruminated that the most inconsequential conversation I had, I repeated it over and over in my head to where that it was just really uncomfortable, not necessarily interfering with daily living, but that I do take some medicine to help me with that. So even sometimes you're doing everything that you know to do, but because it runs in my family and genetically it's there, I still have to take something to help me get a good night's sleep and to not think as much. And so that's how I use my medicine to help me with things. Plus, I'll tell you a story about my brother-in-law who lives in Trinidad, a proud Indian man. He had all his physical ailments. His doctor told him his anxiety. He didn't like that answer. He went to another doctor who told him the same thing. So now he's taking Klonopin and Prozac, and he's getting a good night's sleep, which really, really helps him, and he's doing much better. So sometimes we know to do everything behaviorally, but it doesn't help because anxiety as an illness is part of us, just like any other illness. I just want to share that part. So.
Okay, thank you, Risa.
You're welcome. And it's nice to see everybody.
All right. Do people have specific concerns around reopening? Because we're starting the phase process in a little over a week.
The concerns that I have are things that there's really not much that we're going to be able to do anything about. You know, I know that the current plan regarding teaching is that, or what's been announced to the faculty, is that we're going to try to have a normal opening, which I hope can happen. And then after Thanksgiving, we're going to be online for the rest of the semester. Now, granted, that's not the plan I would like to happen, but it's completely out of our control. And it's just a matter of trying to recognize everything that's been said here. I know that no one on our campus is going to have any control whatsoever over what this virus is going to do or what it's going to look like. And I think a lot of us are hoping for a normal semester, whatever normal is. So I don't know. It's just, I guess that's what's creating it. It's that, hoping that we can get to that normality and kind of seeing that, but kind of, excuse me, anticipating that something is going to go terribly wrong and that we're not going to get the semester that we were all hoping for or close to it.
Yeah, Anthony, you make good points. One I wanted to seize on is when you mentioned it's not the semester you would prefer. And I think the language you use is really important. And the language people use when they are framing their anxiety is really important. We talk in psychology circles about absolute thinking, which is the language of should not, must not, have to, cannot stand, those sorts of things, which if you attach that to anxiety, it's probably going to increase it. So if you think I'm not going to be able to stand it, I will hate it if we don't have a regular opening for the semester, you're probably going to feel worse if that doesn't happen than if you're able to think, well, I would really prefer that we have that opening, but if we don't, I guess, like everything else we have been doing these last couple of months, we are going to figure it out.
Yeah, that's kind of just, that's kind of what the marching orders that I think all of us are receiving. When it gets closer to the beginning of the semester, I'm going to plan my semester as if what's been announced so far is going to happen. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm going to have to plan for what happens if we have to all of a sudden turn on a dime and go back to online. Right. I don't like that. I'm dreading it, but I guess that's kind of the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think I can't speak for a lot of my colleagues, but I'll tell you, and I may be sharing way too much, but at one time, my dream job was the job I'm doing, but at the University of Arkansas, my alma mater. From hindsight, I don't want that. And the reason I don't want that is that I realize that the reason I am here is the interaction with the students. And I'm going to I get a lot more of that here than I would if I were faculty at the University of Arkansas, as amazing as that place is. And that's the thing I think that's creating anxiety in me, is that the best thing that I enjoy about this job and working at UCA is the very thing that this entire experience is taking away. And just by way of example, I teach I've got a version of my class online. I teach the online class because I think that I'm in the best position to teach the online class given my skill set and others who are available to do it. Just because I can do it, just because I'm saying I'm willing to do it, that doesn't mean I want to do it. But it's the nature of the beast. And again, the biggest reason I don't want to do it is because in that experience, that takes away the biggest reason why I'm in this profession and want to be here at the university. So just, I guess that's kind of where I'm coming from with all of this stuff and what's leading to any negative feelings that I have about the entire experience.
Okay. Somebody just asked a good question on the chat. And Risa said, you may have to help yourself at this point and talk to others in the same position. Yes, the interaction with the students, I think that is something UCA really prides itself on, and for good reason. We do that well. We haven't been able to do it these last months. We may not be able to do it this fall to the same extent. But, you know, to try and keep in mind that our present is very stressful. It's not likely to stay like this forever. So for example, if you think about the students that just had a very unique graduation experience, the first 4.5 on average years of their college experience were very normal and hopefully very positive. So they still have that. Okay, that I think one person made a good point. Since we pride ourselves on that interaction and being able to do a lot of good things, and somebody's question was, you know, having to say no when we don't have this or we can't do this right now. That is going to be hard, but we have good reasons for doing it that way. And whether people receive that well or not, I think that's what we have to keep in mind. I'm hoping that everybody is going to keep their kind hats on as we figure this out. That's one thing that can happen when people get anxious. Then they start to get angry and then they take their kind hat off. And then we have a mess. I'm hoping people on both sides will remember that we're all just trying to figure out a new normal and get through this. So let's try and work together instead of against each other.
Yeah, I have a question. I know I've utilized counseling services on campus, and I just always appreciated y'all's confidentiality and professionalism. But since we've gone to the employee assistance program, I just haven't used that. And I don't know if it's because it just seems like this strange entity out there. But could y'all maybe explain a little bit about what that looks like or sounds like if an employee chooses to go that route? Because I've just been kind of intimidated about it.
Okay, Mariah, since you're on here, I'm gonna throw that ball over to you.
Can you repeat that really quickly? I'm so sorry. I just had someone come to our door.
Oh, no, since Charlotte just asked about the EAP program, which is not as familiar, just because it hasn't been around as long for our services, what would it look like? What does it consist of if somebody wants to access it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. First of all, it is completely confidential. It's something that's offered apart from UCA. So, you know, who you talk to will not be someone that works at UCA. So there's a nice privacy barrier there. But you would generally just call the phone number and make an appointment. They'd be happy to see you either in person or you can do a phone or video conference session. And there's no cost to you. And also, if there's a family member that needs assistance, they also qualify for the for EAP.
And I think, Susan, you said that, you know, if any faculty or staff has a question, want to give us a call, consult, they can do that as well with us, correct?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, you can. So, yeah.
Sometimes you're not, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's, the EAP, as far as accessing those sorts of things, I think, you know, we need to get used to, and it is for some people easier that we are very recognizable working on campus as well. But as Mariah said, and I've talked to some people where that's a hindrance as well, that they're like, you know me and now you know my stuff and I have to see you. So yeah, we're going to try and be a resource, whether it's referral, answer the question, that sort of thing. But I've talked to 1 or 2 people who have utilized it and the feedback's been good. So, and I mean, I guess that's the other thing that makes it seem unfamiliar is when people have used us in the past and had good or bad experiences, you hear about it because we're here and we're all here. When you seek a provider off campus, that's not going to happen as much. So that may make it seem a little foreign as well, but getting into that process could in fact be very helpful.
One other thing I just wanted to ask or point out, I know yesterday I had a student call me who was very upset just about life in general, but she was also asking about counseling. And I told her about the new telecounseling because she lives out of Conway. And I was trying to clarify whether a student had to be currently enrolled in order to receive the telecounseling or if they had to wait. So would y'all, because when I see all these names on here, I realize how many of us work with students and want to help students with anxiety. So would y'all just share that just in case a student seeks us out for counseling?
Sure, and that's actually an email conversation I had with Jamal, our new SGA president, this morning. And yes, I think that's going to be one of the big things. And since we are serving students, is we're going to be dealing with our own anxieties, but we're also going to be dealing with theirs. And so, yes, with the telecounseling, and actually with any of our services, the policy is as long as the student is enrolled in the upcoming semester, so meaning the fall semester, they do not have to be taking a summer class to receive our services. That's what we call continuity of care. So they are a UCA student by virtue of being registered for that upcoming semester, which makes them eligible.
And I think going back to one of the things about this being new, one of the things I've had to work with is not knowing the answer. And going back to Jessica's question is many times I will say, I don't know. Okay, when somebody asks me, I really don't know, which then gives a freedom to say, okay, what do you think we can do? Or what do you think we can go from here? So giving ourselves permission, one, don't know how it's going to be. Keep in contact with me or I'll follow up with you is a good way. Even if you have to say no to someone, come back and holler at me is a good way to check up with them and still let them know they're not alone in this. Okay, so that's another way to, again, still offer some support, even though you can't give somebody something they want.
Right. Yes, you can do that. And then I've seen a thread on the chat as far as being concerned about student workers. And again, I think that's a concern for both student workers and us UCA employees, is that what about people who don't have the choice to not work? So you just have to accept the risk of coming here. That's one of those, okay, I just have to live with this situation, can't control that. So what can I control in that, which is to try and be as safe as possible, to have everybody be as respectful as possible of the guidelines they're putting in place with the social distancing, with the wearing of the masks when we need to wear them, with allowing people time to clean, understanding that some things are just going to take longer because they can't let as many people into a place, or, you know, other reasons. It's just, we may not be able to work at our usual speed, just to make sure that people stay safe and feel safe as much as they can.
One of the things I think, again, Dr. Sobel supports this, is that it doesn't hurt, if you have any question about mental health, meds, or anything, or student, it doesn't hurt to give us a call, because if we can't help, we definitely will give you a referral source. We will not leave you hanging. So you just, doesn't hurt to make a phone call at all, okay?
Yeah, and the EAP, the same thing, they do free consultations.
Mm-hmm. Just out of curiosity, I know we're talking about our students coming back and your guys coming back to work, but the ones who are parents out there, how are you feeling about your children going back to school? Okay, I could tell by your silence, you all are thinking about this question.
So hey, Risa, this is Anthony, and I guess not so much not saying that not so much about COVID-19. I'm going to be honest. I used to be an educator, and I'm really more concerned from the education standpoint because the last month and a half when our school was doing the AMI or whatever you want to call it, the online stuff. I just felt like that there were some teachers that were just not prepared for the extended time of a AMI concept. And I hate to kind of plunk out some here on campus, but it's kind of like the Blackboard. We realized that not everybody really was familiar with Blackboard as they should have been.
I'm not ready for my kids to go back to school or daycare for that matter. I have a 2.5-year-old who is susceptible to getting every sickness from a sneeze and a cough to the flu. And I'm just not ready for, he's been home with me since I started working remotely and since Conway School District even though his daycare was still open, since my 8-year-old was out of school, I just kept him home with me too. Just because I didn't want him to go to daycare and take that risk of him getting sick. And I too have concerns, not necessarily about my daughter's education, because for me, it was easier. She actually did really well at home with AMI, but I know for a lot of parents, it's not as easy for them. They don't have the luxury of working remotely and having a spouse that also was able to work remotely, and the two of them being able to homeschool their child. So I know that is a concern for other parents, that their child may not get the education that they would be getting in a classroom setting. But it is scary to me knowing that they're going to be going back to school and are going to be around. I just don't know how they're going to social distance children of those ages safely and keep them healthy.
Yeah, that scary stuff that some things we can't get information about right now, and we can't control.
This is Doris Pierce talking, and so I guess more of what I'm about to say is a question or a statement. So I know in the media right now there's a lot of concern about whether stores, restaurants, and places are requiring students to requiring patrons to wear masks, to wear a surgical mask or whatever type of mask they are going to be wearing. I guess my concern is, will students be required to wear masks everywhere? And if they don't comply with that, what is going to be the next step? Will a student not be allowed in the classroom or allowed in an office? Or I guess that's, my biggest concern at this point for our students is that they may choose not to be safe. And is that choice going to kick them out of a classroom or keep them away from a building? Or so I guess that's my question.
Okay, Doris and everybody else, and that's a big one. My understanding is that people on campus, so students, faculty, and staff, are going to be required to have face coverings when they are in public areas. Outdoors, I think as long as you comply with social distancing, it's not necessary, but in the public areas, and again, these are the things we will be tweaking as we go, but public areas, yes. So that would be a general office area. That would be the hallway of a building. And I'm going to give the example for the counseling center. Many of you have been up here. You've seen we have a waiting room. that people sit next to each other, across from each other, that sort of stuff. So we are going to say that part of our standard when we reopen is that people will have face coverings when they are in the front office and the waiting area. And if they are not going to comply with that, yes, it may be their right to not wear a mask, but it's everybody else's right to try and stay safe by having you wear one. And we do have, I think, the right to have that policy and insist that it be reinforced. And if they're not going to do that, then they are not complying with a directive from a university official. And that's a violation of the Student Code of Conduct. Kelly, are you in this meeting? Kelly Owen? She may not be. That's a Dean of Student things. But so if they're not cooperative with that, it's like we have the right to refuse people service if they're not behaving accordingly. And if they really want to get belligerent, which is our typical policy, if you're really going to get belligerent, then we will get the assistance we need, which, you know, might be involve you having a chat with the police department. But I think that's where it comes back into the, let's hope everybody remembers to be respectful and kind to each other. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that. And I don't think it's unreasonable to enforce it when it doesn't happen.
This seems to fall under a general observation that I have about people, that 90 to 95% of them aren't going to be a problem. It's going to be that 5 to 10% that's going to make our lives a living hell.
You were right, Anthony.
Yes, I agree with that.
Most of the students, they're going to come on campus. They're going to say, okay, they're going to say, what are the rules? Most of them are going to say, okay. Some of them are going to say, I don't like it, but I understand. Fine. It's just that small percentage that is going to make our lives miserable. Now, that being said, I'm in light of Doris's concern, I'm hoping that if that happens, we have enough support from the university to be able to enforce whatever rules are in place. I've never had a situation where I've had to kick a student out of a classroom. I've never had to deal with the mechanisms of, okay, you've got a really bad problem student, what do you do about it? Mm-hmm. But just hopefully, if the university mandates masks for all the students while they're in classrooms, and then I get that student that says, I don't want to wear a mask, I'm just hoping that I have the tools to deal with that student without disrupting the educational process of the rest of my students. And you know, now that we're talking about it, we may have to contemplate that situation where a professor makes the choice and says, you know, I can either deal with this, or I've got X number of other students in this room who are being educationally neglected. I may have to give up this battle to make sure that I'm taking care of the rest of my students.
And when you say give up this battle, what do you mean?
As in, let's say the rule is every student needs to wear a mask. You get a student that comes into the classroom, they're not wearing a mask, and they are insisting that you can't make me wear a mask, ... Do I fight that battle with that student about the mask? Or with the limited amount of time that I've got with the rest of my class, do I say, I don't feel like I have the time to deal with this. I'm going to affirmatively choose not to fight this battle in order to make sure that I'm meeting the educational needs of the rest of my class.
Okay, I think, so you keep it short and sweet and hopefully they, this will be something that's set out as far as expectations going in, that people know you're wearing a mask in the classroom or you will be asked to leave. And if a student's being disruptive, you simply say the policy is you need to have a mask if you're going to be in here or you need to leave. If you're not going to leave voluntarily, then I will get assistance. They're still, if they're not leaving voluntarily, if they sit down without the mask, I will have to double check with Mergy that this is going to be the policy, but you would contact them to, or whoever you needed to say, student, whoever you are, not complying, you need to leave because you're not being safe. You're not allowing everybody else to be safe.
So, so Susan, this is anything. It's like with us, okay? It is a Department of Health directive that when you come into a facility like ours, you will have one. So you will not be walking into our front door if there is not one, necessarily not wearing it right at that moment because you're still outside. But, when you are expected to walk into our facility, you have one. Bottom line, we will turn you away. And same thing before, just like if you did not have an ID to come into our facility and you thought you were going to come into our facility and you don't voluntarily turn around and walk right out the door, yes, I am calling UCAPD, and they will come and escort you away from our building.
Yes, and as somebody pointed out, they step in quickly and they do it very well. They're very calm. They're good at what they do.
So I just kind of want to step in here, and I hear where you guys are going. And so what I'm going to say, again, really good questions. And I think if we step back a little bit, those would be, we would have answers to those questions as that safety committee goes through. And
yes.
And I know we talk about PD coming in. So one of the things is we could also, like those restaurants where you have to wear a tie and you don't have a tie, they have a tie waiting for you at the front door. Sometimes we might be able to have extra masks in the classroom and say, hey, would you put this on for the time being and we'll talk later, so you don't have to go to that PD thing. And one of the things that's also interesting, we're talking about students, but folks, being a counselor on this campus, we're going to have some issues with our faculty and staff also, right? Because we may
with some of them, yes.
Yeah, because we are just bigger kids and older kids, okay? So, hopefully by talking and say, hey, wear this for a minute, then we'll go talk some more. We could not have to have a, very unpleasant situation on top of a pandemic,
Yes.
So.
Well, again, as Anthony pointed out, most people are good about following the rules. So there may be a few, and we'll get it figured out. As somebody just pointed out, we're waiting for ADHE guidelines. But the other thing to keep in mind is these will be, we're going to be sending this information out to the students in a variety of ways. This topic, the approaching change topic, I'm already scheduled to do those with different student groups, or we'll be offering them to students. So I'll have this information, but yeah, they will get out the information on what's going to be expected when you come here, and how we can work together to keep everybody safe and make sure you get the education and college experience, such as it is now, that you want to get. Okay, any last comments? We are about to run out of time.
One thing I wanted to bring up is just, I think it's so important for us to extend grace to one another. Like when y'all brought up the question, I think Risa did, about having kids going in, how do you feel about having your children? My kids are grown and gone, so that's not an anxiety or fear I'm wrestling with, but yet I'm a caregiver for an 87-year-old mother. That's my fear. So we're all, it's kind of like what I've repeated at another session, is we're all in the same storm, but different boats. And all of us have different circumstances in response to COVID, and just being patient with one another with each of our circumstances. They're all different, but they're all important to us at that time. So I just wanted to throw that out, because it's fascinating hearing other people's concerns that are different from mine, but yet valid for that person.
Yes, and Mariah just
Bobby.
pointed out on the chat, there's a session tomorrow on preparing to return to on-site work, which some of us never left, but some of us will be doing on June 8th. Brittany, did you have any last words?
Oh no, I just like what she mentioned about the grace and just kind of reminding yourself that, you know, we're all going through this, but in different ways. And, you know, be careful about generalizing that normal because, you know, we had a normal, whatever that was. And now we're kind of shifting and trying to adapt to what's going on now. And so that normal is always going to be different for people, and just being mindful of that and just extending that grace to people and saying, you know, like, I'm here for you. You don't have to have all the answers. Just lend an ear and be there and listen and just try to help one another the best you can.
Yes. And as Risa said that, you know, sometimes, you know, for like example with the mask, okay, I hear you. It's frustrating to have to wear these now, but let's try and work together.
Yeah.
So, all right. Thank you all so much for attending. And there should be lots of good information as we go forward, coming around in different formats. So everyone take care, and we'll look forward to seeing you as you head back to campus.
Bye.
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 Bye.